Hello everyone, I hope you're having a wonderful day. Today, we're going to dive into a powerful and emotional story, a tale of love, fear, and courage, as Jack and Tu Tien face both a raging storm and hidden threats from the past. It's a journey of resilience, sacrifice, and the unshakable bond that keeps them together, even in the darkest moments. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you won't miss the next episode. Rain tapped softly against the tin roof, a gentle drizzle wrapping the farm in a gray haze. Inside the small kitchen, Tu Tien stood by the sink, her hands moving slowly, almost reverently, as she washed a pile of cassava leaves. The water trickled through her fingers, the green leaves glistening under the dim kitchen light. Her face, lined with quiet worry, held a sadness she tried to mask, though her eyes betrayed both longing and determination. The cassava dish she was preparing was no ordinary meal. It was Jack's favorite. To her, every leaf she cleaned and every motion of her hands carried a silent promise, a way of giving back to the man who had given her so much love. Preparing that dish was her way of saying thank you, of giving a piece of herself in return. Outside, the drizzle thickened into heavy rain, pounding against the roof and echoing in the narrow room. Tu Tien's thoughts drifted to Jack. He's still at the site. Is he safe? Her chest tightened as the storm worsened. Each rumble of thunder seemed to magnify her unease. The flickering images on the TV, a storm warning crawling across the bottom of the screen, only deepened her fear. Meanwhile, far from the quiet kitchen, Jack hurried away from the farm after receiving a sudden call. His steps were quick, urgent, yet his face remained composed. Years of discipline had taught him to hide emotion when needed, but inside, his thoughts ran sharp and restless. At his mother's home, the warmth of another story unfolded. Jack's mother welcomed a visitor. Hang, a young woman with an open smile and the glow of countryside youth. She carried gifts, small tokens from her village, and her presence seemed to brighten the dim living room. She chatted eagerly, her eyes glimmering with admiration whenever Jack's name came up. "I heard he's looking for people at his company," she said with hope, leaning forward, her voice quick with anticipation. Jack's mother listened with gentle patience. The bond between their families went back many years, and she still remembered Hang as a child. Now, seeing her grown and ambitious, she felt a kind of maternal warmth. "I'll talk to Jack," she promised, her lips curving into a smile. Back at the farm, Tu Tien pressed on with her task. The grinding of cassava leaves filled the quiet, mingling with the hum of rain outside. As her hands worked, her mind slipped back to memories of the mountains, days of struggle, long afternoons spent gathering cassava for fish feed, her clothes sticking to her skin under the scorching sun. Life had been harsh, but those memories were part of her, shaping the strength she now carried. She paused at the window, staring out at the sheets of rain pelting the farm. Her thoughts circled back to Jack. "He does everything for me. He gives and gives. And what do I offer in return?" Her chest ached with both gratitude and guilt. The rain distorted her view, but in her heart, Jack's face was clear, steady, like a lantern cutting through the storm. When Hang finally left Jack's mother's home, her visit left a lingering warmth. The young woman's laughter and cheerful chatter still echoed faintly, softening the silence. Outside, the storm showed no signs of relenting, but inside, there remained a glow of familiarity and comfort. Back at the farm, Tu Tien carefully packed the cassava into a glass jar, pressing it firmly with her hands. It was almost as though she were pressing her fears down with it, trying to trap them beneath the weight of salt and leaves. The sound of the news report continued in the background, a monotone reminder of danger, yet her mind was fixed elsewhere. She whispered to herself, barely audible over the rain, "He'll come back." The kitchen was small, its single bulb casting faint light on the wooden counters, the chipped dishes, the familiar clutter of their daily life. Yet within that space, Tu Tien stood tall in her own quiet way. The jar she sealed was more than food. It was a symbol, a small piece of her hope, something tangible she could build while everything outside felt uncertain. The storm rumbled again, shaking the windows. But inside that room, Tu Tien's resolve flickered like a candle flame, fragile yet stubborn. It was anchored by Jack, her faith in him, her trust in his promise. Time passed, and though the rain softened slightly, the damp air still clung heavily to the village. At Jack's mother's house, a warm yellow lamp threw gentle light across her features. She recounted Hang's visit to her son, her voice touched with nostalgia and fondness. "She wants to work at your company," she explained, remembering their family's long connection. Jack listened, his face thoughtful. He nodded slowly, acknowledging the favor, his mind balancing gratitude for the bond between families with the practical needs of his work. "I'll see what I can do," he said, his voice even, though a flicker of distraction passed through his eyes. As he changed clothes, preparing for the tasks ahead, a moment of softness broke through his composed exterior. He glanced at his mother and spoke of Tu Tien, urging her to give her daughter-in-law only light chores. "Don't let her work too hard," he said gently. That thought lingered in him, the protective care of a man who carried his family's burdens quietly but fully. At the farm, Tu Tien stood again by the cassava jar, stirring in salt with slow, deliberate motions. Her eyes seemed to focus on something far away, her mind tangled in memories of hard mountain days. She remembered bending beneath the sun, the sting of sweat in her eyes, and the relentless rhythm of survival. Each memory weighed on her, but each also reminded her of how far she and Jack had come. She turned toward the window, the glass streaked with droplets. Outside, the fields blurred into gray. Her heart felt heavy again, gripped by the same fear. Where is Jack now? What if the storm keeps him? She held her phone for a moment, her thumb hovering as if she might call him, but she didn't. Instead, she clutched it to her chest, whispering, "He does everything for me," as though confessing to the silence. The TV droned on, its voice dull and unfeeling, reporting damage, warnings, loss. To Tu Tien, it was just noise, another reminder of life's fragility. Back in her own house, Jack's mother sat quietly, her mind wandering to the thought of planting flowers for Tu Tien. Something simple, something to brighten the farm, an easy task that might lift her spirit. She smiled faintly at the idea. Tu Tien, meanwhile, lifted the cassava jar to a shelf. The glass gleamed faintly in the dim kitchen, holding inside both sustenance and something more intangible. A vow, a promise of continuity. She stepped back, her eyes soft with a glint of hope. Outside, the clouds lingered, brooding. Yet within her heart, Jack's image remained her guiding star. The room seemed to echo with that quiet faith. The jar was just food, yes, but also more. It was her offering, her way of building toward tomorrow. A fragile promise, glowing faintly against the storm's uncertainty. Rain poured heavier now, thick sheets falling like a curtain over the road to Un village. The wipers on Jack's car struggled to clear his view, streaks of water blurring the headlights of distant vehicles. The air was thick with tension, and Jack's hands gripped the steering wheel firmly, his gaze sharp, every nerve alert. In the rearview mirror, two figures appeared, suspicious, persistent. Their silhouettes flickered against the storm, and though their faces were hidden by rain and shadow, their presence struck him like a memory carved in pain. The past clung to them. His heart raced, but his face stayed calm, his body steady. Who are they? Why now? The question sliced through his mind, but he already sensed the answer. His phone buzzed in the passenger seat, and with one swift hand he snatched it up, dialing a familiar number. "Comrade Thu." His voice was low, controlled, yet edged with urgency. "I'm being followed. I'm sending you my location." He ended the call, his mind already calculating, mapping every turn, every move. Fear simmered beneath the surface, but he locked it away. There was no room for panic. He thought of Tu Tien, alone at the farm, listening to the rain batter the tin roof. The image burned into him, becoming both shield and sword. Back at the farm, Tu Tien stood in the dim kitchen, her hand resting on the cassava jar. The storm outside pounded so fiercely that the walls seemed to tremble. She stared at her phone, willing it to ring, desperate for a sign. "Where are you, Jack?" she whispered, her voice breaking as she held the device close to her chest. The TV continued its endless reports: floods, storm warnings, danger. Yet none of it mattered to her. The only danger she could think of was Jack's silence, the unknown that gnawed at her heart. At Jack's mother's house, Hang's voice filled the air again. She spoke eagerly about her accounting studies, her admiration for Jack spilling into every sentence. "He's so capable," she said brightly. Jack's mother smiled, nodding, though her heart was heavy. She could not shake the unease. Her son was out there, somewhere on those darkened roads. Jack slowed the car slightly, pulling to the side as though he were checking something. The two figures in the trailing vehicle crept closer, circling like vultures sensing weakness. He lowered his window, glancing casually in his mirror, though every muscle in his body was coiled tight. "It's them," he muttered to himself, confirming what he already knew. His jaw tightened, a cold determination washing over him. These were no strangers. This was the shadow from before, the ones tied to the pain Tu Tien had endured. He reached into the glove compartment, pulling out an oil bottle. A plan was forming, sharp and dangerous. If they wanted him, he would draw them in, trap them where escape was impossible. He turned his wheel, guiding his car off the main road and down a narrow lane leading deeper into the village. The mud splashed under his tires, rain whipping harder, the path narrowing with every turn. Behind him, the figures followed. At the farm, Tu Tien could no longer stay still. She paced the small kitchen, her hands trembling as she reached for her scarf. The rain hammered so hard it drowned out her thoughts, but her heart whispered one refrain: "He must be safe. He must." The storm rattled the windows, but she pressed her forehead against the glass anyway, straining to see through the blur of night. On the road, Jack guided his car into a dead-end alley, the walls high and the path slick with mud. He stopped abruptly, the engine rumbling low before he killed it. The silence that followed was broken only by the rain, the drumming of water against metal. He bent forward, clutching his stomach, and shouted into the night, "Help me! My stomach! It hurts!" His voice cracked, sharp with feigned pain. The two figures hesitated, caught off guard. Then, slowly, they stepped from their car, approaching him. Their boots splashed in the puddles, their eyes darting with suspicion. Inside, Jack's heart pounded, but his gaze was icy, calculating every move, every second. His phone buzzed faintly. Comrade Thu's voice crackled through. "Keep them there. I'm coming." Jack gritted his teeth, slipping the oil bottle into his hand, pretending to rummage beneath the hood. The rain muffled every sound but amplified every step the men took. He could feel them closing in, the air between them charged with menace. In his mind, Tu Tien's face flashed again, standing in their small kitchen, whispering his name, waiting. That image fueled him. She must be safe. I will not let them near her. The footsteps grew louder, then stopped right behind him. "Need some help?" one of the men sneered. Jack straightened slowly, his eyes locking onto theirs, cold and unflinching. Blue and red lights suddenly pierced the darkness, flashing through sheets of rain. Police sirens wailed, growing louder until they broke into the alley. "Freeze!" a commanding voice thundered. The figures spun in shock, but it was too late. Officers closed in, swift and unyielding. The metallic snap of handcuffs cut through the storm as the men shouted, "We didn't do anything." Jack stood tall, his shoulders squared. His voice, when it came, was sharp as ice. "They harmed me. They harmed Tu Tien. Justice must be done." The storm raged on, but within him, a strange calm settled. His chest rose and fell heavily, relief and exhaustion battling inside him. Back at the farm, Tu Tien sank into a chair, her hands clasped tightly in prayer, though no words formed. It was as if she could feel the shift in the air, the release of some unseen weight. On the road, the officers led the men away, their voices drowned by the rain. Jack's car sat waiting, the headlights dimmed but steady. He opened the door, sliding behind the wheel. His hands trembled for a moment before he steadied them on the wheel. The path home stretched before him, muddy and slick, but he pressed on, his eyes focused, his heart pulled toward the farm. The past had left scars, but tonight, a chapter was closing. The rain's rhythm changed as he drove, blending with the fading wail of sirens. Each mile drew him closer, the weight of fear lifting, replaced by a single need: to return to Tu Tien, to hold her, to promise her it was over. The village slipped away behind him, swallowed by the storm. Ahead, the lights of the farm glowed faintly through the rain, a beacon. Inside the kitchen, Tu Tien lifted her head as the familiar sound of Jack's car reached her ears. She ran to the window, her eyes filling with tears as she saw his silhouette step out into the downpour. He walked toward the house, drenched but resolute, his gaze fixed on her. The storm raged around him, but in his eyes burned something stronger than fear, an unbreakable love, a vow renewed. As she opened the door, the rain splashed against her feet. She didn't hesitate. She threw herself into his arms, her sobs muffled against his chest. Jack held her tightly, his voice steady despite the storm. "It's over. You're safe. We're safe." Behind them, the storm still howled, but within their embrace, there was light. His love was a lighthouse, guiding them through the darkness, through the chaos, toward tomorrow. And as the night stretched on, their fragile hope grew stronger, no longer just a flame flickering in the dark, but a promise forged in courage, sacrifice, and love. Amid heavy rain on the farm, Tu Tien quietly prepares Jack's favorite cassava dish, her heart torn between love and worry. Each leaf she washes becomes a symbol of gratitude for the man who gives her everything. Meanwhile, Jack rushes away after an urgent call, carrying the weight of hidden dangers. At his mother's house, warmth lingers from Hang's hopeful visit, but unease shadows every smile. As the storm worsens, Tu Tien clings to hope, whispering that Jack will return safely. On the road, Jack notices two suspicious figures trailing him, memories of past threats igniting his resolve. With careful calculation, he lures them into a trap, holding steady until the police arrive. Justice is served, but Jack's only thought is to return home. Through the storm, love becomes their anchor, a fragile flame turning into a steadfast light.